Over the weekend, I happened to watch a film that, in my opinion, turned out to be utterly brilliant. It was called Captain Fantastic, and it followed the story of a father who was bringing up his six, I think it was, children out in the wild. They hunted and grew their own food. They had quite a strenuous regime of physical activity, and they spent a lot of time each day studying too. The children all spoke multiple languages, and they had a better understanding of the world, of philosophy, politics, law, as well as all the usual school subjects, than many children of their age in conventional education. When the film begins, the mother has been in hospital for 3 months with mental health problems, and she has just committed suicide. Her parents have arranged the funeral, and they don't want her husband or children to come. But nonetheless, the family travel to be there. As this family, who live a life that is completely connected and in tune with the natural world, come into contact with the kind of living that we're all probably more used to, tensions arise. The film holds a mirror up to what so often passes as life, and it reveals the disconnectedness. Disconnectedness between human beings, disconnectedness between human beings and the food we eat, and disconnectedness between the things that are really important and the things that we think are important. It was funny and sad and thought-provoking, and I can highly recommend it. I was really pleased to stumble upon this film as it resonated with the book that I've been reading called Rewild Yourself by Simon Barnes. The author points out that we're not just losing the wild world, we're no longer noticing it. We've lost the habit of looking and seeing and listening and hearing. We've become disconnected. The book gives 23 ways to help us change our way of thinking and looking so that hidden wildlife will appear in front of our eyes. It's not a very big book, and the chapters all have intriguing titles like Magic Trousers and Time Travel. It's something else that I would recommend to you today. On the back of dipping into this book, Graham and I have downloaded an app onto our phones that helps us to identify birdsong. There are not a huge number of places that we can walk to straight from our own front door, but actually it is possible within a few minutes to find ourselves on footpaths or quiet lanes. And since Christmas, we've been making the effort to have a daily walk, seeing as the local leisure centre has had to close down during lockdown. We kept hearing different bird sounds, and apart from crows, magpies and pigeons, which are all very distinctive, we didn't actually know what anything was. We've also been a bit disappointed in Highworth that we get very little variety of bird life in our garden, despite the fact that we put out food nearly every day. We wanted to know what else might be out there. So during last week, we took our first walk out with the new identification technology, and we were amazed. The app lets you record a portion of birdsong. It gets sent off immediately to the lab in Norway, and within a few seconds, the results come back. The first thing that Graham picked up on his phone was a redwing, and we've also heard blue tits, great tits, long-tailed tits and goldfinches, as well as the things we were expecting to hear like robins and blackbirds. It could become addictive. Even though we don't actually record every bird song that we hear, we found that even in the last few days we've been listening differently, paying more attention to the different sounds that we can hear and just stopping every now and then while we're walking to notice what's happening around us. We were given some money for Christmas to get some binoculars, and when we find the right pair, I'm sure that that's going to take us to a whole new level of awareness of the world of nature. That will take us into the world of the chapter called A Spell for Making Birds and Beasts Come Closer. For a long time now, even before coronavirus struck the world at the end of 2019, I've been struggling with a sense of being out of balance. Walking the Camino for my sabbatical in 2018 highlighted that imbalance to an extent, and I definitely took some steps when I returned home to think about the balance of work and family life. But there's been a bigger kind of imbalance bothering me. The human systems that we've created to apparently make the world go round just don't seem to be working anymore, if indeed they ever really did. Capitalism and consumerism have disconnected us not just from each other, but also from the natural world. It seems to me that everything is seen as a resource to be used for profit, People are exploited for their labour, often working in terrible conditions to ensure the biggest profit margins for the corporations, and the Earth's resources are plundered apparently limitlessly. We say we want change, but we don't actually want to change ourselves, and anyone who sticks their head over the parapet to try and lead or provoke change, like Greta Thunberg, is instantly shot down. There's a possessiveness about the value of life that over the last few years increasingly is seen to be judged only on economic grounds and in terms of production and progress. If you weren't aware of it before, perhaps the way we've tried to handle the current pandemic has opened your eyes a bit. Many people are personally living in a crisis, struggling perhaps with the loss of work or support structure that is a result of the pandemic, and the environmental crisis continues to grow at an alarming rate. And there seems to be a sense of futility hanging in the air. A massive change in mindset and outlook is needed if we're going to be able to stop or reverse the environmental crisis. And we may say we agree with that, but not many of us are willing to really dramatically change the way we do things so that we use fewer resources, learn to be content with what we have, and think about the planetary impact of each of the simple actions that we take for granted every day. Even using our cars a lot less would be a start, and judging by the hideous amount of traffic that goes past my house every day, I wonder if I'm the only person still in lockdown. Is anyone actually listening to the directive to stay at home? The amount of cars on the road seems to tell me another story. I believe that God is challenging me, and probably not just me but all of us, to discover that interconnectedness that is essential to life on earth. A popular interpretation of the creation accounts in Genesis for centuries has been that humankind is master of everything else. That kind of thinking has led us into seeing the natural world as having no intrinsic value, no benefit apart from what it can do for us. It has to an extent provided some kind of justification for colonialisation, slavery, industrialisation and capitalism, and the results of that are seen even today. We need to move away from the kind of selfishness of activity that we see as one of our rights of dominion as we look at Genesis chapter 1 verse 28. We need to discover instead the responsibilities that lie behind God's directive to the humans to keep the garden that we can find in Genesis 2 verse 15, to care for and tend, to enable the flourishing and well-being of every living thing. We need to see that God created all of us to live together, humans, plants, fungi, fish, animals and birds, and that anything that neglects or prevents the flourishing of even one part of the natural world is in fact detrimental to the whole created order, and that includes us. We need to rewild ourselves, understanding ourselves, yes, as lovingly created by God, but not alone in being recipients of that divine love and care and attention. I'm worried about a lot of things, and I'm fearful of the world that we're living in and of the potential future if we don't all get a grip on our actions right now. I'm vegetarian, I try not to buy things in plastic packaging, I try not to buy processed food, I try to buy things that haven't travelled too far, I try not to buy things I don't need. I've recently learnt more about the carbon footprint of food that goes way beyond miles travelled, and that's having another impact on the things I feed my family. I'm becoming more connected to the stories behind my weekly shopping than I've ever been before, I think. But I'm aware that there's still plenty more to be done. Part of me would love to completely disconnect from the rat race and head into the wild, to feel that intimate connection with the natural world, and through that to discover in a deeper way the connectedness of all things with our loving God. I know that's not really possible. For a start, there's not enough wildness to go round to cope with all of us if we chose to go out there. But I know that I can't use that as an excuse not to do anything. I believe that God is challenging me this year to rewild myself, to take steps to learn and notice more about the rest of life around me, to understand our interdependence, and to show my care in ever more practical ways. If we want to believe that God created only human life and that everything else is here by accident, then perhaps we could justify our lack of care and concern. But if we believe that God created and loves all things, surely that has to make a difference to how we live our lives. If we encounter the divine spirit in the animals who are part of our lives, if we see the divine gift of flourishing in the plants and trees that surround us, how could that make us think and act differently? And if we hear the divine voice in Birdsong, what is God calling us to do and to be?